Hi, everyone. I'm Alana, and I'm here to share with you how I transformed my lawn into a sustainable landscape on a budget. In this presentation, I will share the nuts and bolts of DIY sustainable landscaping and urban permaculture, and give an overview from a homeowner's perspective of what it takes to transform a lawn into a sustainable landscape and what benefits this transformation offers our lives, our communities, and our world at large. I think it's important to note that though many of the resources and information that I offer in this presentation are specific to Solano County and California, where I was raised and where I did my own transformation, most of the resources are supportive for anyone who wishes to install a sustainable landscape, regardless of your location. But before we begin, let me just tell you a little bit about me. I've been involved in sustainable communities around the country for the last decade, including intensive volunteer work with Sustainable Solano, where I filmed the 2023 spring season of my musical blog, This Wonderful World. I've been involved in environmental education for my whole life, beginning with Caritas Creek, the program that my family started, where I was raised as a camper and where I worked as a counselor and site director. As an environmental steward, I was an intern in habitat restoration with the Poudre Creek Council, where I worked with various partner organizations in a wide range of efforts to support the well-being of our local watershed. As an artist, facilitator, and director, I'm the creator of the Living Mirror Project, an arts organization that explores how creative reflection plays a part in peacemaking. But my real achievement here that I'm here to share with you is that within 1 year, I transformed my front yard into a native plant habitat and edible garden. You can see behind that little white picket fence there is also 5 garden beds with veggies in them. I was able to do this entirely within the budget that was granted to me by the Water Efficient Rebate Program from the Solano County Water Agency. It's important to note that I was able to do this with no prior landscaping experience and a very embarrassed black thumb. Because even as I've been living in sustainable communities for so long, I've never really been the one in charge of making it happen and making the decisions. I was the one that kind of was like, okay, I'm happy to help. Just tell me what to do and I'll try not to kill it. So this was a stretch for me. And I share that because I want to be some kind of living proof that you don't have to be an environmental expert or landscaping expert to be able to make this kind of transformation in your home. So let's just start with the benefits of transforming your lawn. I like to look at it from the lens of the environment, the community, and the self. And of course, what's beautiful about this transformation is that everyone benefits. Let's start with the environment. Of course, there's so much benefit to the water in this transformation. One of those benefits is that there's less herbicides that are going into our waters because people often do use herbicides to suppress the weeds in their lawns, and those herbicides can leak into our gutters and go into our waterways and pollute them. So there's less of that. And then, of course, there's less water use, especially in these dry areas like in California, where we have these extended periods without rain, and sometimes we go years without very much rain. One of the things to know about grass is that it comes originally from the UK. And in the UK, one of the things to know about grass is that it comes from the UK. And in the UK, there is moisture year-round. So the grass hasn't evolved with very deep roots because it hasn't needed to. Because it's receiving moisture all year round, it's able to access everything that it needs right up on top. But in dry spaces like California, where we have these huge extended periods without any moisture at all, the native plants have developed extremely deep roots that allow them to access water during those really long periods of dry time. So when you have grass in California or other places that have these long periods of dry, they require so much watering because their roots aren't able to dig deep enough to access water in those dry times. So less watering for sure. And then the air benefits, of course, I was surprised to learn how much pollution lawnmowers can make. So less pollution from lawnmowers. And then, of course, trees and bushes do absorb a significant amount of CO2. It supports the soil in being rich and full of microbes. And of course, it supports the whole ecosystem. The birds, the critters, the pollinators are all taken care of by this transformation, especially when we incorporate the native plants. One bit of fact that I want to share with you about water savings, and these are numbers that I got primarily from Sustainable Solano, is that lawns take 50 to 70,000 gallons of water per year. A food forest, which is very similar to the kind of sustainable landscape transformation that I'll be talking about today with native trees and plants and veggies, takes 20,000 gallons of water per year. So the transformation from a lawn to a food forest saves, on average, 40,000 gallons of water per year. But what does that mean? What's 40,000 gallons of water? To get an idea of what that looks like, the average person uses 101.5 gallons of water per day, or about 37,000 gallons per year. So the amount of water saved per year with the food forest transformation is over a year's worth of water for an individual. And of course, it's not just the environment, but it's also the community that benefits from these transformations. As I was working in my yard, I was able to build relationships with neighbors that I would have never spoken to before, just by being outside and working in my yard, in the front yard, with the neighbors passing by. People would stop and chat and comment and ask questions. And, we'd get to talking about maybe what they're doing in their yard, or maybe what their grandparents did when they were kids. Sometimes they would ask me if they could participate. Sometimes we would find that we had ways that we could even work together. Like I had one neighbor who told me that she had a giant African turtle as a pet in her backyard, and that if there was ever any green waste that I could give to the turtle, it would make the turtle so happy. So of course I was so happy to share my greens with this giant African turtle in her backyard. I would make a little pile every time I worked in the yard and put it in the front. She'd come by and pick it up and send me pictures of her African turtle. That's the kind of connection that I would have never been able to make if I hadn't been outside in my neighborhood, working in this environment that is just so unifying. It really just cuts through all of any differences that we may have had seem to have not mattered in the face of this beautiful garden that would give so much. It was such a joy, for example, when I had extra tomatoes in the garden that I could just hand them to people as they were passing by. It really instilled a sense of goodwill in the neighborhood, that I felt like I had something to offer. And it felt like there's this kind of trust that is built when we're able to share with each other that I wasn't able to do before. I didn't have that to give. And so being able to cultivate something to share in that way was so fulfilling. And of course, there was so many benefits for the self. My mental health flourished. And I was going through some hard times, and it felt like the garden was really a part of what helped me to get through those difficulties. It's a meditation to be out there and to be in the elements with the fresh air and smell of the soil and the sun on the skin. And even on days where there's gray days where it's drizzly and kind of wet, to feel that freshness of being outdoors soothes the nervous system every time. No matter what I was going through, it would soothe me. And of course, there's so much wisdom in nature. By interacting with it in this way, the metaphor of nature just really comes to life in a way that seems to always have some kind of wisdom to offer me when I have some kind of challenge or some kind of conundrum that I don't quite know how to work through, or I'm needing a new perspective. I would go into the garden, and somehow whatever I was doing that day would begin to speak to me through metaphor and help me to feel like I could find clarity and navigate whatever my challenge was. And then there was just this confidence that I felt like I gained that I didn't even realize I was missing until I found it. That just in being able to be self-reliant, to think that I could grow my own food, to think that I could harvest my own water. It was like there had been something broken in me that I didn't realize needed to be fixed until it was healing. And this confidence was arising in me. And then, of course, there's physical health benefits. The exercise of digging and moving dirt is fantastic. And then, of course, if you're growing veggies or fruits, there's great nutrition that comes from it as well. But of course, this is not the whole story. And it's important to remember that lawns are not the enemy. Lots of people love lawns for some very good reasons. They're beautiful, they're kid and pet friendly, they provide lots of recreational benefits. So many sports happen on lawns, and they have some environmental benefits. They produce lots of oxygen. They store carbon in the ground, unlike trees who store it in their trunks. This means that if a wildfire passes through, the tree that was storing the CO2 in the trunk would burn and re-release that CO2 into the atmosphere, whereas the grass keeps it in the ground. So that's a cool fact about grass. And in areas where there's lots of rain, lawns can absorb a lot of water, making them very helpful in flood control. And they also help to keep areas cool. So with all that in mind, and I'm sure many other reasons as well, many lawn mowers are working to be more sustainable with electric mowers and low water use irrigation or drought-resistant species and more eco-friendly herbicides. And of course, it's important to remember that not everyone agrees that herbicides are bad for our environment or for our health. In fact, I worked for an organization that does environmental restoration and uses herbicides regularly in the control of invasive species. So everyone's got their science. And I think what matters most is that you clarify your own purpose, you do your own research, and that we practice respectful debate and remember to love our neighbors that have a lawn. And it's important that we feel really rooted in why we're doing it, because inevitably, there are challenges that arise, things that we're not able to foresee that then we have to overcome. And with a strong purpose and confidence in our purpose, we're given the strength to overcome those challenges. So ultimately, I still support lawn transformations, even when I look at the whole picture, because it does seem to me that lawns make more sense in wetter climates and much less sense in dry climates like California. And it's been so fulfilling to do my part in supporting the pollinator population, and I'll talk more about how to do that later. My connection to the natural world has deepened so much by getting to know native plants in my home county. You know, I've always loved nature, but I always thought of nature as something that was far away, something that I would have to drive to. Of course, I grew up in an environmental camp that was in the Redwoods, so you know, I knew some of the names and I knew a lot about the ecosystem in the redwood forest, but I didn't know anything about what was going on in my home county, and I didn't know how to appreciate it. So when I began to learn about the native plants and what gifts they bring to the environment in our county, it changed my whole experience of being at home, so that now when I take a walk, it's like I'm walking amongst friends and I can recognize, oh, hi, Coyote Bush. Thanks for giving our birds a place to hide, and hi, California fuchsia. Yeah, so it's turned me into a bit of a nature nerd on a level that I didn't realize I could get, but boy, has my experience been enriched by feeling like I have such a better understanding of who's in the environment and what they're doing. And then, of course, the personal joys and benefits of growing my own food are tremendous. And the best example of this is that my summer harvest came at a time right after my grandmother, who I had been taking care of and who I have loved so much, passed away. And suddenly I found myself just having meals alone every night. And there was something about being able to go to the garden every night and harvest my food and cook it directly that made what would have been a very simple and lonely meal much more meaningful and full of love than I would have imagined as I was moving through that time of grief of losing my grandmother. So it really helped me get through that. And to have, again, this interactive yard where there's wisdom that I can find just by stepping out of my front door really just made my everyday so much more beautiful. So in short, for me, my purpose doesn't feel so much like it's a chore, but a joy. You know, there's scary things that can motivate us in the world right now to act more sustainably. And I think that those things do have a power in motivating us, but ultimately, that's not what got me through the most difficult times in this process. And there were difficult times in this transformation. What got me through was how much it fed me to be doing it, how much it enriched my life to be engaged in this transformation. If you'd like to hear more about the deep rooted reasons that I really love this work and am committed to it, I have a blog called This Wonderful World where I share songs and stories about what I'm doing here. And there's a couple of articles, these two in particular, that I would recommend to you to read and listen to the songs and watch the videos of to get a much better idea of what has motivated me and keeps me motivated to do this work.